Imagine a man so honest that his enemies, even while plotting against him, would still trust him with their most valuable possessions. Imagine someone so compassionate that he would pray for those who threw stones at him. Imagine a leader so humble that despite ruling an entire peninsula, he lived more simply than his poorest followers. This is the story of Muhammad. Peace be upon him, a man whose life transformed not just his time, but the entire course of human history. But this isn't just a historical account. This is the story of how an orphan from the desert became the most influential person who ever lived, and what his life teaches us about character, leadership, and finding purpose in the face of overwhelming challenges. Whether you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or follow no religion at all, the lessons from his life are universal. This is a story about integrity in a corrupt world, about standing up for justice when everyone else stays silent, and about how one person's unwavering principles can change everything. Muhammad was born in Mecca around 570 CE into a world of tribal warfare, social inequality, and moral chaos. But his story begins with loss. His father, Abdullah, died before he was even born. At age 6, his beloved mother Amina passed away, leaving him completely orphaned. He was then raised by his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, who died when Muhammad was 8. By age 8, Muhammad had lost everyone who was supposed to protect him. Most children in such circumstances would become bitter, angry, or broken, but something different happened to Muhammad. His uncle Abu Talib took him in, and though Abu Talib wasn't wealthy, he raised Muhammad with love and taught him the value of hard work. Instead of becoming entitled or resentful, Muhammad learned empathy from his own suffering. The first leadership lesson: pain creates compassion. Those early losses taught Muhammad something profound: what it felt like to be vulnerable, to be without protection, to depend on the kindness of others. Throughout his life, he would show special care for orphans, widows, and the powerless. When he later became a leader, he didn't lead from a palace surrounded by luxury. He remembered what it was like to have nothing, and that memory guided every decision he made. As a teenager, Muhammad worked as a shepherd, then as a merchant. These weren't glamorous jobs, but they taught him patience, responsibility, and how to deal with people from all walks of life. By his 20s, Muhammad had earned a reputation that would follow him for the rest of his life. In a society where cheating in business was common, where tribal loyalties mattered more than truth, where the powerful exploited the weak, Muhammad was different. He was known as Al-Amin, the Trustworthy. People who had never met him personally knew his reputation. Merchants wanted to do business with him. Families trusted him to settle their disputes. Even his enemies acknowledged his honesty. The business partnership that changed everything. A wealthy widow named Khadijah had heard of Muhammad's reputation. She was one of the most successful merchants in Mecca, but she needed someone she could trust to manage her trade caravans. She chose Muhammad, not because he was the most experienced, but because he was the most honest. When Muhammad returned from his first trading journey for Khadijah, he had not only protected her goods, but had generated profits beyond her expectations. But more than that, the people who had traveled with him spoke of his character, his fairness, his kindness to animals, his patience with difficult people. Khadijah, who was 15 years older than Muhammad and had been married twice before, made an unprecedented decision. She proposed marriage to him, the partnership that lasted a lifetime. Their marriage wasn't just a union of two people. It was a partnership that would support the most important mission in human history. Khadijah didn't just love Muhammad, she believed in him completely. For 25 years, she was his strongest supporter, his closest advisor, and his emotional anchor. When the world turned against him, she stood by him. When he doubted himself, she reminded him of his strength. The second leadership lesson: integrity creates influence. Muhammad's business success wasn't built on clever marketing or networking. It was built on character. He understood something that many people still struggle with today. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. In a world full of people trying to get ahead through shortcuts, manipulation, and deception, Muhammad chose the harder path of absolute honesty. And that choice didn't just make him successful, it made him trusted. As Muhammad approached his 40s, he began to feel a deep restlessness. He had achieved everything society considered success: a loving marriage, financial security, social respect. But something was missing. He looked around Mecca and saw injustice everywhere. The rich exploited the poor. Slavery was common and brutal. Women had no rights. Infanticide, particularly of baby girls, was practiced openly. Tribal warfare was constant. People worshipped hundreds of idols, many of them representing the worst human impulses. The Cave of Hira, finding solitude for clarity. Muhammad began spending time alone in a cave on Mount Hira, just outside Mecca. This wasn't escape from responsibility. Khadijah supported his need for reflection. He would spend days and weeks in meditation, wrestling with the big questions. What is the purpose of life? How should people treat each other? Is there a higher power guiding human affairs? This practice of regular solitude and reflection would become one of the most important habits of his life. In our age of constant distraction and noise, Muhammad's example reminds us of the power of quiet contemplation. The night that changed everything. On the 27th night of Ramadan in the year 610 CE, when Muhammad was 40 years old, something happened that would change the course of human history. While meditating in the Cave of Hira, Muhammad experienced what he described as a visitation from the angel Gabriel. The angel commanded him, "Read." Muhammad, who could neither read nor write, replied, "I cannot read." The angel embraced him and repeated the command. This happened 3 times until the words came, "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of blood. Read, and your Lord is most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know." The third leadership lesson. Great leaders question everything. Muhammad didn't accept the status quo just because it was familiar. He saw the problems in his society, and instead of becoming cynical or indifferent, he sought solutions. He understood that before you can change the world, you must first understand what's wrong with it and what needs to be changed. Muhammad's first reaction to this experience was not joy or excitement, it was fear. He rushed home to Khadijah, trembling, asking her to cover him. He was afraid he was losing his mind. But Khadijah's response reveals why their partnership was so powerful. She didn't dismiss his experience or try to rationalize it away. Instead, she looked at his character and made a logical conclusion. By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You maintain ties with your relatives, you speak the truth, you bear people's burdens, you help the poor and needy, you are hospitable to your guests, and you help those who are afflicted by calamities. Her message was clear. Someone with your character would not be abandoned by God or deceived by evil forces. The gradual revelation. The revelations didn't come all at once. Over the next 23 years, Muhammad would receive what Muslims believed to be divine guidance, piece by piece, addressing the challenges and questions that arose in the growing Muslim community. This gradual process taught Muhammad and teaches us the importance of patience and steady progress. Revolutionary change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through consistent, principled action over time. The early followers. The first person to accept Muhammad's message was Khadijah, his wife, who knew him best. The second was Ali, his young cousin who lived in their household. The third was Zayd, a former slave who Muhammad had freed and who chose to stay with the family. The early Muslim community wasn't made up of the powerful and wealthy, though some joined later. It was composed of people who were impressed by Muhammad's character and attracted to a message of equality, justice, and moral accountability. As Muhammad began sharing his message publicly, the comfortable arrangement of Meccan society was threatened. His teachings challenged every source of injustice and inequality. Economic justice. He condemned the exploitation of the poor by the wealthy. He established principles of fair trade and prohibited usury, charging interest on loans to those in need. Social justice. He declared that all people, regardless of race, tribe, or social class, were equal in the sight of God. In a society built on tribal hierarchy, this was revolutionary. Women's rights. He gave women rights of inheritance, the right to own property, the right to refuse marriage, and the right to divorce in certain circumstances. In 7th century Arabia, this was unprecedented. Treatment of slaves. While working within the existing system, he encouraged the freeing of slaves and insisted on their humane treatment. Many early Muslims were freed slaves. The Meccan establishment fights back. The powerful merchants and tribal leaders of Mecca realized that Muhammad's message threatened their way of life. If people were equal, what happened to their special status? If there was one God instead of hundreds of idols, what happened to their role as religious intermediaries? They tried everything to stop him. They offered him wealth. We'll make you the richest man in Mecca. They offered him power. We'll make you our king. They offered him pleasure. We'll give you the most beautiful women. Muhammad's response to all these offers was consistent. If you placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, I would not give up this mission. The fourth leadership lesson: principles over popularity. Muhammad could have compromised. He could have adapted his message to make it more acceptable to the powerful. He could have gained wealth, status, and comfort by moderating his positions on justice and equality. Instead, he chose principles over popularity, truth over comfort, and long-term change over short-term gain. When bribes didn't work, the Meccan leaders turned to persecution. They instituted a complete boycott of Muhammad's family and followers. No one could buy from them, sell to them, or marry them. They were cut off from society. The persecution escalated to physical violence. Slaves who had become Muslim were tortured by their masters. Free Muslims were attacked in the streets. Muhammad himself was assaulted. People threw garbage at him, spat on him, and even threw stones. The year of sorrow. In the space of a few months, Muhammad lost the two people who had been his strongest supporters. His uncle Abu Talib, who had protected him politically, died. Then Khadijah, his beloved wife and closest companion for 25 years, also passed away. Muhammad was now more vulnerable than ever. His enemies increased their persecution, thinking he would finally break. The journey to Taif, when even faith is tested. Seeking new allies, Muhammad traveled to the city of Taif. Instead of finding support, he found the worst treatment of his life. The people of Taif not only rejected his message, but set their children to chase him out of the city, throwing stones until his feet bled. Wounded and exhausted, Muhammad sought shelter in a garden outside the city. It was there that he made one of the most profound prayers in history. O Allah, to you I complain of my weakness, my lack of resources, and my lowliness before people. You are the Lord of the weak, and you are my Lord. To whom do you leave me? To a distant person who receives me with hostility, or to an enemy to whom you have given power over me? If you are not displeased with me, then I do not care what I face. The fifth leadership lesson: resilience comes from purpose. Muhammad's ability to endure persecution didn't come from physical strength or emotional numbness. It came from absolute clarity about his purpose. He knew why he was suffering, and he believed that the cause was worth any personal cost. In 622 CE, Muhammad and his followers made the Hijra, the migration from Mecca to Medina. This wasn't just a change of location, it was the beginning of a new kind of society, the Constitution of Medina. One of Muhammad's first acts in Medina was to establish what historians consider one of the world's first written constitutions. This document established rights and responsibilities for all citizens, regardless of religion, a system of justice that applied equally to all, protection for minorities and their religious practices, a framework for collective defense and mutual support. Building unity from diversity. Medina was home to Muslim immigrants from Mecca, local Muslims, Jews, and various Arab tribes. Instead of allowing these groups to remain separate, Muhammad created bonds of brotherhood between the immigrants and the local population. He paired each immigrant family with a local family, creating support networks that transcended tribal loyalties. This wasn't just charity, it was social engineering at the highest level. Leading by example. As the leader of Medina, Muhammad could have lived in luxury. Instead, he chose to live more simply than his followers. His house was small and sparse. He often went hungry while making sure others were fed. He worked alongside his followers in building the first mosque. When people came to seek justice, they often couldn't tell which man in the gathering was the leader because Muhammad dressed and behaved like everyone else. The sixth leadership lesson: authority comes from service. Muhammad understood that true leadership isn't about commanding others, it's about serving them. He led by example, not by decree. His authority came not from his position, but from his character. Muhammad died in 632 CE at the age of 62. In just over 20 years of public mission, he had transformed Arabian society and laid the foundation for a civilization that would span continents. But his greatest legacy isn't in the empire that followed him. It's in the principles he lived by and taught. Lessons for modern life. 1. Character is your greatest asset. In our age of social media and personal branding, Muhammad's life reminds us that reputation built on character lasts longer than any other kind of success. 2. Principles over convenience. Every day we face small choices between what's convenient and what's right. Muhammad's example shows us that consistent small choices in favor of principle create extraordinary outcomes. 3. Serve others to lead others. Whether you're managing a team, raising a family, or trying to influence your community, Muhammad's example shows that the most effective leadership comes from genuine service to others. 4. Embrace solitude for clarity. In our hyper-connected world, Muhammad's practice of regular solitude and reflection offers a path to clarity and purpose. 5. Turn pain into compassion. Instead of letting his early losses make him bitter, Muhammad used his understanding of suffering to serve others who were vulnerable. 6. Build bridges, don't burn them. Even with those who opposed him, Muhammad consistently chose engagement over isolation, understanding over condemnation. Final reflection. Whether you view Muhammad as a prophet, a historical figure, or simply a remarkable human being, his life offers timeless lessons about integrity, resilience, and purpose. In a world that often seems to reward shortcuts and compromise, his example reminds us that the harder path of principle and service is not only possible, but ultimately more fulfilling and impactful. The boy who lost everything became the man who gave everything to others. The merchant who could have become wealthy instead chose to serve the poor. The leader who could have lived in luxury chose to live in simplicity. His story challenges us to examine our own lives. What principles guide our decisions? How do we respond to injustice? What legacy are we building through our daily choices? These questions matter because, like Muhammad, each of us has the opportunity to influence our world, starting with our own character and extending outward through our relationships and communities. The story of Muhammad, peace be upon him, isn't just history. It's a blueprint for how one person's commitment to truth and justice can change everything. Please like, subscribe, and comments in the video.